Hey, thanks for joining us and happy almost Christmas. Every now and then, I have days where nothing goes my way. And it's usually a bunch of little things that add up. And not too long ago, I had one of these days. I was planning to meet up with a few friends to bike around town, and I had about half an hour left before I had to leave the house. And on the same morning, I also had our new desk delivered to our house for the bedroom upstairs, and that needed to be assembled. So I was faced with a decision. Here I was thinking, okay, so 30 minutes to assemble a table. Yeah, I can do that. I'm a handyman. So I tried, and that 30 minutes turned out to be like an hour and a half of my hands and my arms being scratched and pinched, and me running up and down the stairs because I kept getting the wrong tools, and I was just so flustered because the table wouldn't come together properly, and I was late. And I hate being late. So when I finished, I was packing things up, right? So I grabbed a huge cardboard box that the desk came in. I clamped it in one arm, and in the other hand, I held my vacuum cleaner, and I was heading downstairs to put it away. And of course, on the way down, my heel had to slip on the edge of the stairs, and my bum had to hit the floor really hard, and I had to skid down a few steps. And of course, this all had to be done in slow motion, right in front of Christine. And I looked at her, and she paused for a second, and I knew she was trying to hold in her laughter, but then she bursted out laughing anyways, and I get it, right? I'm always telling her how clumsy she is, but here I am, this like grumpy, angry guy slipping down the stairs with a handful of things, and it was probably pretty funny for her. And anyways, I rushed out the door, and I started biking. And every pedal hurt my bum from the fall. And the bike ride itself, it was long and cold and windy, and halfway there, I wanted to eat something, but I couldn't even get anything because we all forgot our mask. And when I got home, I was just done with my day. And when I have these kinds of days, I comfort myself by doing something very deep and profound. It's this ancient practice of going online to look at people who had worse days than you did. So here are some examples. These guys, they locked their keys inside an armored truck, and it's just like no way to get in. Or maybe when you win the lottery and you get $7. Yay, but your brother got $300 million. And for this one, you pick which one is worse. To have a kid's face imprinted on you, or to be the kid that ran into some dude's spray tanned thigh. And it's like, what do we do with these, right? What do we do when nothing goes our way? And I mean this on the grander scale as well, because this feels like the theme for the past 3 seasons, doesn't it? I mean, look at our Christmas. It's one you would see in a apocalyptic movie or something. And for me, like my family from Ontario, we're supposed to fly over here and celebrate together. But now we're just doing it online. And it's so weird because it's like during a time where we're supposed to be throwing parties and having gatherings, we're isolated and we're not allowed to see each other. During a season where we're supposed to like feel the love of family and friends, we're alone, feeling more secluded than ever. And what do we do with that? How do we even reason with that? What hope do we even have when nothing goes our way? Well, luckily for us, we have a story of a family about 2,000 years ago who had to ask the exact same question. And God answered. So let's learn from this story. It comes from Luke chapter 2, verses 1 to 7. Let's read. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This is the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria. And everyone went to their hometown to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. Our question today is, where do we find hope when nothing goes our way? And our story today teaches us that we can find hope in God's plan and in God's provision. And we'll start with the first. We find hope in God's plan. In my house, we have this Christmas tree here set up. And it's connected to a smart plug. So I can turn it on and off with a tap of a finger. But I just put it on a schedule so that it turns on early in the morning, and by 9 a.m. it turns off. So about a month ago, I was having breakfast with one of my nieces, Grace, who's just like one of the sweetest girls ever. She's bright-eyed, innocent, full of wonder. And we were sitting there, and 9 a.m. hit, and the Christmas tree turned off. And I looked at Grace, and I asked, Did you do that? And she's like, no. So I told her, I think I might have done that. So, I pulled out my phone without her seeing, and I placed my finger to my head, and then I pointed to the tree, and then it turned on. And then she was just like completely mind blown, right? And it was so cute because she's just like so full of wonder. But I'm a pastor. I had to tell her the truth. So I told her this. I told her, if you put your finger to your head and you think really, really hard about the tree turning off, and then you point to the tree, it should turn off. So she follows the instructions. And as she was doing this, I was prompting her to think really, really hard. And when she pointed, it turned off. And she was amazed and she was giggling. And we did it a bunch of times, and it was a really good morning. And later on, I was upstairs and I overheard Grace talking to her mom about her special powers. And so I took my phone and I'm upstairs and I turned the tree on and off. And even her mom was like, "What? How is this happening?" Anyways, I just assumed that my niece kind of knew what was happening, but she was just playing along until lunch. We were having lunch at someone else's house. And in the middle of prayer, I looked up and I see Grace standing kind of by the stairs, and she was doing this to the lights in that person's house. And in the middle of prayer, I just bursted out laughing because she was so convinced she was in control of these lights. And I feel terrible because I still haven't told her to this day. And I'm imagining that to this day, when no one's looking and she's all by herself, she's still trying to turn on and off the lights at her house. This is such a good image of us, right? We hold on to this illusion that we're in control of things, but we feel the truth so clearly this season, right? We're not in control. We can't control what Christmas will look like. We can't control job security or control the weather. We're not in control, and I get it. It's a terrifying thought, but it helps to know that the one who is in control is much more capable than we are, God. In the first verse, we see the reason behind the whole setting of the Christmas story. Why it was in Bethlehem, why all the rooms were taken up, and it tells us that in those days, Caesar Augustus issued this decree that a census should be taken of the whole entire empire, whole entire Roman world. So everyone went back to their hometown to register, and there was like this huge thing. It was this huge thing out of Mary and Joseph's control. However, there's something happening behind the scenes that we can miss if we're not careful. And it's a prophecy. It's written 700 years before this census, before the birth of Jesus, and it's in the book of Micah. Micah chapter 5, verse 2. Let me read it out for you. But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose origin is from of old, from ancient days. See, this prophecy, it's about a great king and ruler who will come from Bethlehem. And that's exactly what's happening in our story, that Jesus, King of all, is born in Bethlehem. So despite being helpless against all these different factors out of their control, Joseph and Mary were actually right where they were supposed to be in God's plan. And God is using all things for good. God is even using the free will decision of like a pagan emperor of an invading nation to fulfill his plan, to fulfill this prophecy. And as Joseph and Mary earnestly lived out their faith in God's plan, their choices and their sacrifices are used in powerful and everlasting ways. And I'm sure they had no idea what God had planned, right? But hindsight is 2020, because as we're looking back at this story, we can see the puzzle pieces coming together that shows us that though we're not in control, thank goodness God is. And all these unfortunate events are within his scope of control, and we can apply this learning to our lives. We are standing in Mary and Joseph's shoes right now. Right? We're confused. We're disappointed about what life circumstances kind of look like right now. But if we're faithful in this time, we can look back maybe 5, 10, 20, 100 years down the road and say, oh, that was part of God's plan and it was good. I was talking to a friend, a former classmate of mine the other day, and he said this one thing that really stuck out to me. Right? He said, it's strange, but I think my wife and I are going to be one of the few that come out of COVID stronger than ever. And that clung on to me because it is strange, right? While me and the people I know are saying stuff like, this year is whack and let's count it as void and let's just erase 2020. And we're just submitting to the fact that we lost a year or two of our lives. Why has my friend gained those 2 years? Right? Think about it. Why? While the rest of us are going to be 2 years behind, he's 2 years ahead. What makes him different? Well, I think he understands exactly what we're talking about today. Right? He knows that he and his wife are exactly where God intends for them to be, and they'll continue to live out their faith in any circumstance. And there's so much to learn from that, right? For us, don't just wish the season away and say, oh God, can 2021 or 22 come faster? No, it's full of potential and grace. Even when it doesn't seem like it, God is still in control. Trust me, God isn't looking at Christmas 2020 and saying, oh dang, I didn't see that coming. No, he's in control. But we have to take up our part in God's plan. God has filled every day with potential for like acts of kindness and acts of faith and moments of peace and rest. Just as Joseph and Mary had everything they needed to join God's mission and change history, so do we. We just need to take advantage of what we've been given. Make use of this season in a way you couldn't if it was any other Christmas. As I practice this mindset that God is still in control and this is a part of his great plan, this season completely changes for me, right? It becomes a season of rest and reflection on God's grace, or a way to become closer to Christine and even my dog. It's a way to serve others by reaching out to my neighbors in their loneliness and disappointment. What is it for you? In this Christmas season, know that we are right where God wants us to be and live out your faith to the best of your ability, however that may look. Our second point is that we find hope in God's provision, in what he has given us. And this idea of giving, right, it reminds me a lot about Christmas gifts and, well, I guess stressing over what we give our loved ones. Because I remember as a kid, every time I got like socks and like another picture Bible, I'd be so disappointed. I wanted action figures, I wanted cars. So as a grown-up, I don't want to be giving crappy gifts to other people. And yet, for some reason, Christine and I are like the worst gift givers ever. I think it's because we're not gift people, but we just don't know what people want. We don't even know what we want. On my side of the family, there's only one niece, Kezi, and she's like our little precious gem. And Christine and I don't want our gift to her to be lame, so we did the best thing possible, right? We gave money to her mom, and we made her mom buy a gift for us. So that way, for sure, Kezi would love it. We would have gotten her what she actually wanted. But my brother, Dan, he had this whole different approach. He was going to open up a trust fund for my little 6-year-old Kezi, and put some money into some stocks and get her familiar with the idea of investing in economics. And at first I was like, okay, if I was Kezi, that would be the worst gift ever, right? I can't play house with stocks. I can't dress up a trust fund. But when I think about it for myself, that would be a good gift, right? Because it's actually useful, and I think he's on to something. Dan sees what's good for her in the long run. He wants to give that to her because realistically, the things she wants now will be useless to her in the future. So when we talk about this idea of provision, perhaps it's more than just getting what we want. I believe it's receiving what we need and what is actually good for us. So let's look at verse 6 and 7. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. Reading that, you may be thinking, what? How can you say God provides when Jesus, his own son, was pretty much like born in a barn to a poor family? What kind of provision is that? That sounds more like punishment, and I get it. It's hard to think outside the world we've been raised in, because when I think of blessing and provision, I automatically think of luxury and comfort and getting what we want easily. But for this family, their provision was having everything they needed for the most important work of their lives, raising the Savior of the world. See, God didn't give them what they wanted. Rather, God gave them what they needed and what was good for them. Someone used this analogy to kind of explain this to me once. Someone said, sometimes we would pray to God to help us trust him more, or to be more loving to our neighbors. And these are really good things to pray for, and really good things to want. But then God gives us someone super annoying and life-draining, and they come into our lives and we get so mad and bitter about it. But realistically, that is like the perfect way for God to answer our prayer, right? That's exactly what we need in order to trust God more and to be more loving. We're able to trust God more through tough times. We're able to love people more as we deal with the less lovable people and we understand them more. God gives us what we need and what is good for us. For Joseph and Mary, it was probably so hard and confusing for them to be traveling far for a census and to be denied a room, especially when they're about to give birth, but this was the best thing for them. They're blessed by being given the chance to be a part of one of the most important events in history. I mean, look at us now. We're reading about it 2,000 years later. It would have been wrong for them if they would just simply wish the moment away for something they thought was better. The truth applies to us. God gives us what we need and what is good for us. And sometimes what we need is just the right kind of difficulty in our lives. And we can be thankful for it. There was a week a while back where my family were given a bunch of 50% off coupons for Uber Eats. And that was so awesome because that meant the whole week, every dinner, we get something yummy to share together. And it was so exciting, but at the same time, there was something weird that ended up happening. So while I was eating Monday's delicious dinner, I was thinking about and planning for Tuesday's dinner. And while I was eating Tuesday's dinner, I was on my phone looking for Wednesday's dinner, and so on and so on. And because of that, I couldn't actually enjoy what I had in front of me. I was so focused on what I could get that I forgot what I have been given. What I love about Christmas is that we get the chance to reflect on what we have been given, especially in the person of Jesus, God's gift to us. So let's do that together. Let's reflect together for a bit. Think about the character of God. He's loving, so he wants the best for us. And what can he give us? Well, he's all powerful. So for him, creating a whole nother universe for us would have been effortless for him, right? It would have just been like a word or a thought. And yet, in his love and in his power, he sent his son, Jesus. And in the most humble way too, born in a manger to a poor family. And the audience of this Savior King were mere animals and shepherds. And he lived in our broken world, suffering and dying at our hands so that we may be given the thing we needed the most. a life in full through a relationship with Jesus. See, God could have given us a whole universe at no cost, but what he gave instead costed him everything. A gift no one asked for, and yet one everyone needs so deeply. If that's what we can learn from the gift of Jesus, then how can we even question that God holds back good from us? How can we doubt God's provision? So for this season, God hasn't given us the usual Christmas, the one we might want. But he's given us something else, and it's exactly what we need. So let's give thanks to God for fulfilling our needs, even in this season, and show gratitude to those around you. Be aware of the provisions that God has given us instead of the wants we are lacking. And as we do that, we are more able to trust in God's plan, power, and goodness in both the good times and the bad. And that will bring us hope, peace, joy, and love. Let's end with a recap. Where do we find hope when nothing goes our way? Well, we find hope in God's plan. That God is working and he has given us a role in his plan. And that is to make the most of what he has given us. We find hope in God's provision. So we give thanks for the nice things, but also for the difficult things, because both are intended for our good.